So one of the most critical parts of writing an argumentative essay is developing this thesis statement. And I remember I told you that the thesis statement is kind of like the conclusion of your argument that everything else is trying to support in an argumentative essay. Now, it could be a recipe for disaster just to write a thesis and then start. You have to actually know something about the issue. What a lot of students do is they have a strong opinion on something and they write that as their thesis statement, and then they're determined to prove that is correct, whether or not they've really thought about it. And remember, confirmation bias kicks in when you have an opinion and you're just trying to prove it. And so you don't want to do that. You actually don't want to start with a thesis statement. You want to start with an issue. And an issue is just an important or controversial or disputed question or claim. So something like, is it morally permissible to eat animals? Is evil evidence against God? These are kind of big questions that are controversial. They're important. They mean something. Did the President Bush bomb the Twin Towers, or did President Obama, was he born in Kenya instead of in the U.S. instead of in Hawaii? These are kind of controversial issues, and these are topics that you want to explore before you just write a thesis statement. So after selecting the issue, you want to do research with an open mind. Now, I gave you some conspiracy theories. I don't really think you should have an open mind with conspiracy theories for reasons that we've talked about already in the class that I've laid out. But anyway, you should usually engage topics with an open mind. Find out what other competing claims are out there, what other theories or hypotheses are involved, and be able to look up all of that information. Now, not all issues, and I want to make a caution of this, not all issues have two reasonable sides to it. And not every competing theory is worthy of consideration. So it's kind of common in our age to just give equal weight and equal standing to every different opinion, whether it's good or bad. But you don't want to do that in critical thinking. So, for example, you don't need to consider irrational claims. The earth is not flat, and you don't have to consider that claim if you're writing about a controversial issue on the geography or on space or or the solar system. You don't have to consider those irrational theses. You want to look for reasonable theses, and reasonable theories or theses or hypotheses are ones that are held by a large number of experts, ones that are contained in scholarly journals or textbooks, one that makes testable, reasonable claims. Those are the different types of theories that you're looking for, the different types of hypotheses. Then, after you start exploring the issue, you want to narrow the issue. And one of the biggest mistakes that students make is they start with huge issues, something like, does God exist? And they expect to answer that in, 7,000 or 3,000 words. There's no way you're going to do that that quickly. So you want to, after you do a little bit of research, it should be clear how big a topic is, and you're doing a kind of a short paper for these college classes, so you got to see through research that the needs are going to need to be narrowed. So, for example, it would be way too big of a topic to say, does God exist, as your question, that your issue. But maybe you could say something about, are the arguments from evil good evidence against the existence of God? That would be something that you could probably tackle in a college-style paper. At least I hope so, because I have my students write on that a lot. Not in this class, in other ones. A major error of students is to write thesis statements that are way too broad to be covered in a short essay. So you want to make sure that your issue is narrow and your thesis statement is narrowed. After you've narrowed the issue, you can start looking more deeply at arguments on both sides. Now, you're not going to be able to consider every argument on both sides, because a lot of these things, most of the really good questions, have been debated for many years, and there's a lot of arguments on either side. So you have to narrow the ones that you'll consider. You'll see some arguments being repeated over and over again, and that's a good sign that that's an important argument. So you want to take notes of the most important arguments on either side. For example, I wrote my dissertation on abortion. That's the broad topic, way too broad even for a dissertation of 200 pages. But I wrote it on abortion, And kind of, I'm a pro-choice person, and I was kind of arguing in that sense a little bit. Dissertations are weird, but I was kind of arguing in that sense. But an anti-abortion argument that comes up over and over again is one written by this philosopher named Don Marquis. It's a very important argument. And if I didn't consider it, if I didn't look at it, it would be obvious that I was ignoring an important argument. There are other anti-abortion arguments that aren't that good that I could leave out of my dissertation. So what I wanted to do is focus on the best arguments. So that's what you want to do. You want to see which arguments are being repeated, which ones have good expert opinion on it, and then choose those to focus on in your as you're studying the issue. Choose the argument that you think, the side of the argument that you think makes the strongest case on the issue. Note what other arguments are on the same side that you don't find convincing, and note the big, powerful arguments on the opposite side as well. This is helping you figure out where you stand on it so that you can write a thesis statement. So after choosing the argument you're going to support in your essay, now you can write a preliminary thesis statement that you can revise and change as you go along. For example, a thesis statement might be, contrary to popular opinion, the argument from evil does not produce a serious challenge to God's existence. That would be one that you could then argue for in the rest of your paper. So we started with that huge issue, does God exist? And then we said, we're going to narrow it to the argument from evil in God's existence. And then we created a thesis statement, contrary to popular opinion, the argument from evil does not produce a serious challenge to God's existence, right? And then you could defend that particular thesis statement if that were the paper you're doing. After you've gotten your thesis statement, then you want to do an outline. And I know you hate doing this because you just want to start writing, you want to start typing because you're waiting to the last minute to do it. But outlines are crucial for the early stages of writing. It puts a sketch of your idea and the structure of your paper, and it can help you avoid disaster. So I strongly, strongly encourage you to write an outline. You may discover in the outline that the argument you chose is indefensible and you have to change topics. You may discover it's too broad or too narrow. You may discover that you don't understand your argument. You might find holes in your thinking that you need to fill. So do not skip the outline stage. It's very important to kind of see your argument out on paper. What you want to do in your outline is write the thesis statement at the top of the outline. Don't put it under any Roman numeral or anything like that. It's just the top of your outline. And then keep going back to it after every premise, after every Roman numeral that you put down, to make sure that that line supports the thesis, because that's all you're supposed to be focused on is the thesis. Or maybe it answers an objection to the thesis, or it maybe supports one of the premises. Assign each premise a Roman numeral and check that it's related to the thesis. Go back to each premise and ask how it should be supported. And so you have your thesis statement, then you have your Roman numerals on the big headlines, and then you want to say, well, how does that need to be supported? What evidence do I need for that to show that that is true? And then you might list that as a capital A, B, C, so you know how the outline goes. You got your Roman numerals and your capital letters and then your numbers and all that kind of stuff. And so you might say, what objections are there to the theses or the premises that you've given? And you can either, like I said, group all the objections together on one part of your outline, or you can list them as subpoints, the 1, 2, and 3 under each of the points that you're making in your paragraph. The outline should be a good overview of all the points you're going to make in your paper, and it's a great roadmap for your essay. It can and you should revise your outline as you develop your paper, because it's irrational to stick with an outline if it's in an error. Okay, one more thing. Not one more thing, but let me talk about your initial draft. Sorry, I know these videos are a little long, and it's like not my expertise, so I don't know how exciting it is. In your initial draft, you want to develop your introduction, like we talked about earlier, explain the issue very simply in a way that your reader can understand. Don't assume that your reader is going to share your understanding or take your side of the issue. Be fair. Don't turn them off right at the beginning. Just state the issue. Include a clear and succinct statement of your thesis in the opening paragraph. The reader should know right away what you're arguing for and why it's important. That's what you want to get across in your opening paragraph. It's often nice to quickly lay out your argument and how it will proceed in the essay. So you might say, I will argue that the argument from evil doesn't produce strong evidence against the existence of God. First, I will suggest that. Then I will say, and finally I will conclude, and you just write out in your first paragraph exactly what you're going to then do and lay out in your paper. It's a general idea, a good idea to devote one paragraph to each premise, though sometimes it might be necessary to devote several paragraphs to a single premise. Each paragraph should have only one idea and represent one premise. Each sentence in each paragraph has to relate to the premise you're trying to support. And then you're going to either deal with your objections after each point or save them for the final section or one section of your paper. Finally, and this is it, conclude the essay appropriately, underscore the importance of the topic, challenge your reader to act, highlight a claim that you defend in the essay, make sure it's on topic, don't introduce any new ideas, and make it something that the reader enjoys the end of as well. Okay, again, my apologies for speaking outside of my area of expertise. I hope this was helpful for you, though, in forming an argumentative essay. Hopefully the materials that I provide for you in this section will also be helpful, and I wish you best luck. We're about to start writing our first essay for the class.